There's a particular kind of calm that settles over a city after midnight. The noise fades. Footsteps become occasional. Streetlights paint the pavement in small pools of amber, and most people take that quiet as proof the night is winding down safely. But on June 12, 2018, in Melbourne, that quiet carried something else entirely. A young woman had just finished performing at a comedy bar. For her, comedy wasn't a casual pastime. It was the thing she was building her life around. When her set ended, she did what she'd done plenty of times before. All this. She left on foot, alone, walking streets she knew, heading toward a destination she fully expected to reach. She never got there. By morning, her name was everywhere. By that night, the city was grieving. And even years later, the details still leave people with the same unsettled feeling, because the answers are clear in one sense and brutally hard to accept in another. Her name was Eurydice Dixon. She was 22 years old, a comedian, and also a daughter, a sister, a partner, and Nothing about that night looked reckless. Nothing about her routine suggested she was doing something dangerous. She wasn't chasing trouble or making risky choices. She was simply trying to get home after work. What happened to Eurydice wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a wrong turn. It was the result of another person's decision, made with complete disregard for the life it would erase. In the hours after she was killed, investigators began rebuilding her final movements. They leaned on CCTV footage, phone records, and the predictable patterns of a city settling into the early morning hours, and what they uncovered was deeply disturbing. Eurydice hadn't been attacked by chance. She had been followed. For more than an hour, someone trailed her through Melbourne close enough to keep her in sight, but careful enough to avoid drawing attention. She didn't know he was there. There was no reason for her to suspect danger was moving behind her step by step. When her body was found in Prince's Park just before dawn, it didn't feel like one isolated act of violence. It felt like a line had been crossed. For her family, the ordinary sense of safety was shattered in an instant. For the community, familiar streets suddenly felt different. And for a country already grappling with violence against women, the case hit like a sickening confirmation of a fear many people lived with every day. Eurydice Jane Dixon was born on November 10, 1995. She grew up in Melbourne, a city known for creativity, live performance, and a thriving comedy scene. From early on, she was pulled toward the arts. She loved storytelling. She loved being on stage. And she loved the simple power of making people laugh. People who knew her described her as thoughtful and sharp, someone who noticed things other people missed. Her humor was dry and observant, not loud, not desperate for attention. It landed because it felt honest. For Eurydice, comedy wasn't about shock or spectacle. It was about connection. She studied drama at Deakin University, where she committed herself to performance and writing. On stage, she carried herself with confidence and self-awareness, willing to talk about personal experiences and subjects that weren't always comfortable. Offstage, friends described her as gentle, kind, and deeply empathetic. Someone people trusted, someone people leaned on. In early 2018, she reached a milestone she'd worked toward for years. She made her Melbourne International Comedy Festival debut with her solo show, At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist. Mattered to her, not only because of the festival, but because it represented something real. Proof that the path she'd chosen wasn't a dream anymore. It was happening, step by step, in her own way. At 22, she was still developing her voice, still imagining what came next. She talked about new material, new projects, future possibilities. She wasn't rushing. She believed there was time to grow. And like most people, her life was built around routines that felt normal. Late nights after shows, talking with friends, walking home along routes she knew. Those routines felt safe because they always had been. There was nothing in Eurydice's life that suggested she was in danger. Nothing about her plans that night pointed toward what was coming. And that's what makes this story so hard to sit with, because it isn't about a mysterious stranger in a headline. It's about a young woman in the middle of her life, still becoming who she was meant to be, with no idea her story was about to end. On the night of June 12, 2018, Eurydice performed at a bar in Melbourne's city centre. It was a weekday. The venue wasn't huge, but to her, it mattered. Every set was another step forward, another chance to sharpen her voice and connect with people through the work she loved. After she finished, she stayed a while, talking with friends and coming down from the energy of being on stage, the way performers often do. Then, at about 10:30 p.m., she stepped outside and began walking toward her father's house in Parkville, several kilometers away. It wasn't an unusual route. She'd taken it many times. Even at night, Melbourne still had movement. Trams rolled past. Cars passed through intersections. Small groups drifted between venues. It looked and felt like a normal city night. As she walked, she used her phone messaging friends. In one message, she said she was almost home. It was casual, everyday language. Nothing that hinted at fear. Nothing that suggested she sensed danger. But by that point, she wasn't alone anymore. Later, CCTV footage would show that a young man noticed her in the city and began following her on foot. Sometimes the distance widened, sometimes it narrowed, but he adjusted his pace to match hers, close enough to keep track of her, far enough back to avoid standing out. For over an hour, he stayed behind her through city streets, past intersections, past tram stops, past places where light and people were nearby. At no point did Eurydice look back or show any sign she knew she was being watched. Eventually, she entered Prince's Park, a large green space at the edge of the city. Inside the park, the environment changed. It was quieter, darker, the paths tightened. The streetlights were more spread out. This should have been the final stretch, the last portion of a familiar walk home. Somewhere inside the park, Eurydice was attacked. It happened fast, with sudden and devastating violence. There was no long struggle visible to the public. No moment where someone nearby stepped in. It unfolded away from the street, away from witnesses in the early hours of the morning. Just before 3 p.m., on June 13th, a passerby came across her body on the grass of a football oval inside Prince's Park and called emergency services. When police arrived, it was immediately clear Eurydice Dixon was dead. The news moved quickly through Melbourne. A young woman had been killed walking home. A performer who had been on stage just hours earlier was gone. And as detectives began to map the night, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't random. This was the final moment of a pursuit that had started quietly in plain sight on city streets, unnoticed by everyone around her. Eurydice was pronounced dead at the scene. Within hours, the park was sealed off. A place people used for exercise, shortcuts, and open-air events was transformed into a crime scene marked by tape, forensic lights, and officers moving carefully through the darkness. As daylight arrived, investigators confirmed what the evidence showed. Eurydice had been sexually assaulted and strangled. The injuries were severe. There was no indication she knew the person who attacked her. No sign it was a meeting gone wrong or a dispute between acquaintances. This was violence inflicted on someone who was simply trying to get home. By mid-morning, reports spread that a young woman had been found dead in Prince's Park. Shortly afterward, police confirmed her identity. For her family and friends, it meant instant devastation. Messages from the night before, conversations left unfinished, plans for the coming days. Everything stopped without warning. For investigators, the urgency was enormous. The attack happened in a public space along a route many people used. Whoever did this had moved through the city in the park, and now the priority was to find him quickly. Detectives retraced her final hour. CCTV became the spine of the investigation. Cameras from bars, street corners, tram stops, and nearby businesses were reviewed frame by frame, and what they saw was chilling in its consistency. From the moment Eurydice left the bar, a man appeared behind her. Camera after camera captured the same figure, following her route step for step. Sometimes he slowed, sometimes he closed the gap, but he stayed with her. The footage didn't show hesitation. It showed patience. It showed patience. It showed intent. And as the timeline tightened, police realized this wasn't an impulsive burst of violence. It was a deliberate pursuit carried out openly, while the city around them continued to move. On the afternoon of June 13th, Victoria Police released images of the man seen in the CCTV footage and asked the public for help. The request was urgent and direct. Someone would know him. Someone might have seen him. Across Melbourne, the photos appeared on television and spread online. The face became familiar almost immediately, and then the case shifted. Not long after the images were circulated, a 19-year-old man walked into Broadmeadows Police Station in Melbourne's north. His name was James Todd. At first, Todd denied harming anyone. He told police he had seen himself in the footage and recognized that he'd been in the area, but insisted he hadn't attacked anyone. He claimed he'd gone home alone, but detectives weren't convinced. The CCTV showed him following Eurydice for more than an hour, keeping close, adjusting his pace, tracking her route. That wasn't coincidence. It wasn't accidental. When police told him he would have to provide DNA and undergo forensic testing, his demeanor changed. He told them not to bother. He said he was responsible. He said he would tell them everything. James Todd was taken into custody and formally arrested. During interviews, he admitted he had followed Eurydice through the city and into Prince's Park. He admitted attacking her, sexually assaulting her, and strangling her until she lost consciousness. His account matched what investigators already had: the pursuit, the location, and the violence. Further investigation uncovered more disturbing details about his actions before and after the crime. Earlier that night, he had left a friend's house and wandered the city alone. After killing Eurydice, he returned to the park. Later, he searched online for violent content and for information about the case. Police charged James Todd with murder and rape. Additional charges related to earlier sexual offenses would follow. His arrest brought relief to a city that had been living with fear, but it didn't bring closure. The who was now clear, but the weight of the why settled in even heavier because the answer didn't offer meaning. It only revealed how predatory and deliberate the act had been. As the case moved forward, the investigation shifted into a different phase. Now the focus was accountability, and what happened in the darkness of Prince's Park would be examined in open court. James Todd faced charges of murder and rape, along with additional sexual offenses from separate incidents. The evidence against him was overwhelming: CCTV tracking his movements, forensic findings, and his own admissions. In November 2018, Todd appeared in the Supreme Court of Victoria and pleaded guilty. There would be no trial, no jury evaluating competing versions of events. The facts weren't being contested. For Eurydice's family, the guilty plea brought complicated relief. Responsibility had been acknowledged. But nothing in that courtroom could reverse what had been done. No sentence could restore their daughter, their sister, their partner, their friend. During sentencing, the court heard detailed descriptions of Todd's actions on the night of the murder. Prosecutors laid out the hour-long following and how he deliberately selected the moment and place to attack. They described the violence Eurydice endured and the fear she must have felt in her final moments. The judge described Todd's behavior clearly: calculated and predatory, not sudden or impulsive. A sustained course of conduct that ended in extreme violence. Victim impact statements were read aloud. Eurydice's family described the destruction left behind. The silence where her voice should have been. Everyday moments now marked by unbearable absence. Birthdays that would never come. Conversations that would never happen. A future stolen without warning. Those statements weren't just about punishment. They were about keeping Eurydice present in the space where the system tends to reduce people to evidence and procedure. They made it clear she was not a headline. She was a person, and she mattered. In September 2019, the court delivered the sentence. James Todd was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 35 years. He would not be eligible to apply for release until at least 204. It was among the harshest penalties available under Victorian law, reflecting both the severity of the crime and the court's view that Todd posed an ongoing risk to the community. When the legal process ended and the courtroom emptied, the reality remained unchanged. The law had acted. A sentence had been imposed. But justice in cases like this is always incomplete. Nothing could undo what had been taken from Eurydice Dixon's family and friends. That grief didn't end with a verdict. It became permanent. Outside the courtroom, her death had already ignited a wider reckoning. Thousands gathered in Prince's Park for a vigil in her honor. It was a public expression of sorrow, but also of outrage and solidarity. Leaders across different levels of government spoke about the case, placing it within broader conversations about public safety, gender-based violence, and the need for cultural change. In the months that followed, Eurydice's story became a rallying point, a push for safer public spaces, a catalyst for national discussion about violence against women that went far beyond Melbourne. Grants and initiatives were created in her name, including programs supporting female comedians, carrying forward the reminder that even though her life was brutally cut short, her impact didn't disappear with her. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night.